Hello, readers. Susan Linn is a psychologist, a world-renowned expert on creative play and the impact of media and commercial marketing on children, and the founding director of the organization now known as Fair Play. She's also the author of Consuming Kids, The Case for Make-Believe, and her newest book, Who's Raising the Kids? Big Tech, Big Business, and the Lives of Children. Susan, thank you for the time. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. So what was your goal with Who's Raising the Kids?
Well, I can tell you, first of all, what my goal was not. My goal was not to make parents feel guilty. My goal was to help anyone who cares about children to realize that the, digitized, over-commercialized culture that children wake up to every day is toxic. It's toxic not just for them and not just for their families, but actually for all of society. And I wanted to help people realize that this is not just a family problem, it's really a societal problem, and that there actually are things that we can do about it.
Yeah, we're in a strange place with all of this right now, because if you are the parent, and I know this from experience, if you're the parent with an 8 and a 6-year-old and your kid doesn't have a tablet, in some cases doesn't have a phone, apparently, we're going to get into this a little bit later, then you're the odd one out. And if your kids aren't spending several hours in front of a television or in front of a screen in some way, shape, or form, and we're not even talking about school, then you're the one who's doing things in a bizarre manner. And there's something really wrong with that.
Yes, basically we've been bought and sold by big tech and big business, and we've bought into the idea that time with screens or time with tech is educational for all kids, from babies, on up through adolescence, and that kids need to be in front of technology or need to be using tech devices in order to be popular or in order to succeed in life. I mean, they've done a really, good job of selling educators, parents, all of us on how essential their products are. And to some extent, they've become essential. So it's not so much the tech itself, which is basically hugely powerful and seductive, but it's the business model that big tech uses to hook kids all the time, to get them to nag their parents, and to get them basically to fall in love with their devices.
That's right. And we'll get into the internet interconnectivity of it all shortly. Chapter 1, though, is what children need and why corporations can't provide it. As you point out, Susan, the neural connectivities in children's brains are hugely impacted by repeated experiences, shaping everything from behavior to habits, values, and even future responses to things that will happen. This cannot be stressed enough. Recurring positive interactions with people, places, and things will literally stick with children for the rest of their lives. And the same can be said about negative experiences as well. So how does this immersion in and reliance on this hyper commercialized, digitized society impact all of that?
Well, I think that what we have to remember is that young children learn and grow and develop using all of their senses, and that they develop. Healthy development occurs in relationship from infancy, in relationship with adults who love them and care about them. And one thing that the tech industry has been doing is coming between parents and children. Devices are marketed as taking over what have traditionally been parental roles, like reading stories or telling stories or helping with homework. And so the devices are marketed to parents as being time-saving, making their lives easier. But what's happening is that we are raising a generation of children who turn to tech for soothing and amusing themselves instead of developing their own inner resources, and instead of really attaching and deriving pleasure and wonder from the world around them.
Yeah, and speaking of, why do you believe that awe is an under-discussed quality of pro-social behaviors that we should be nurturing more in kids nowadays?
Yeah, well, awe was only recently proven to be an emotion, which is interesting, a universal emotion across cultures. And it's essential to a sense of wonder. And after experiencing awe, people tend to be more pro-social. They may be more generous. And the experience of awe is feeling simultaneously small, but also part of something larger, and a recognition that we are connected. We are connected, to each other. We are connected to the universe. I think providing children with opportunities for wonder and for awe is certainly essential for helping them connect with nature. And it's essential that we all connect with and celebrate nature, because nature, the planet itself, is in a lot of danger right now from global warming. So it helping children develop a sense of wonder about the world around them is just really crucial.
Well, awe also implies the ability to be present and to pay attention to what's going on around you. And I think one outcome of awe is a curiosity as to why something is happening, and a willingness to ask questions and to try and find answers as well. And those also really seem to be lost art forms nowadays.
It's interesting that you raise, curiosity, because curiosity is is a normal state for neurotypical kids. I mean, that they are born primed to be curious. And one of the things that I do in the chapter that you mentioned, actually, what children really need and why corporations can't give it to them, I talk about my cousin Ellen sent me a video, and it was technically a terrible video. It was just it was bad, but anyway, but when I saw it just took my breath away. And it was a video of her 14-month-old granddaughter sitting on a blanket in silence, which is unusual for kids today. I mean, because one of the the problems with commercial culture is that it's extremely noisy and busy, and there's all sorts of stimulation coming at kids, and they need opportunities for silence. We all need opportunities for silence in order to think and to dream. So she's sitting there, she's safe. My cousin is there. And so this 14-month-old Ariel, all she has to play with are would now be thought of as retro, terribly old-fashioned, boring toys. An old baby doll that doesn't talk or do anything, and also a stuffed bear. So she's mouthing the baby doll, which is, you know, what babies do. She's mouthing the doll, and her hand is wandering, you know, around the doll's body, and she gets to the doll's toes, and she feels the toes, and you can see her little mind working. I mean, it's like she's thinking protuberances, which she's not thinking the word protuberances, but you could see just her mind working, these little things that are sticking out. And so she feels her ear, but it's not right. And you could see that as well. Well, no, it's not like my ear. And her hand goes up the body to the doll's ear, and she traces the doll's ear, and then she feels her own. And she traces the doll's ear again, and then she feels both of her ears. And she does it one more time, feels the ear, traces her own ear, and then she goes away. I mean, she doesn't go away, but she just stops doing that and goes on to something else. I mean, that's such an incredible example of human learning that is born of our innate ability to be curious. You know, you've got this 14-month-old, which is what is set, but with what is essentially a sculpture of a human body. And somehow she thinks that the body of the doll might be like her body, and she sets about trying to prove it to herself. That is so astonishing, not because it's unusual, but because this capacity is, you know, in all, as I said before, all neurotypical children. And that, you know, capacity for wondering about something and then figuring out how to satisfy your curiosity, being willing to fail, and then, you know, meeting your goal and then going on to something else. I mean, that's so important, you know, for not just, you know, for babies, but for life, to you know, find within yourself the capacity to initiate something and to follow through and finish it up. I mean, the jargon, the educational jargon is executive function. That's a really critical skill. And now there's actually research suggesting that the more screen time babies and toddlers have, the less developed their capacity for executive function. And that's really troubling.
That's really sad. I wanted to get back to the subject of sitting in silence for just a sec, because you used to work with Fred Rogers, aka the late great Mr. Rogers, and we could probably do an hour podcast just based on that experience of yours in and of itself. But why did he espouse the virtue of sitting in silence for adults, but especially for kids too?
For both. And this was, I mean, the conversation that I had with him about silence was long before smartphones and tablets, you know, where there's so much more noise today. Because the importance of being able to, to go deep within yourself and to recognize yourself as part of, but separate from, the rest of the world, to be able to dream and imagine and think. I mean, it's just, he felt that, I mean, it was just so important. In fact, he felt it was so important that he did a show where he just said, we're just going to be quiet for a minute. And he sat on television for a minute in complete silence. It was extraordinary.
That is greatness. And I think one of the other benefits to silence also, Susan, is that it really allows your brain to recharge, because we live in this world where we constantly have things that are trying to grab our attention. Now, it's one thing when you're walking around on a city street, let's say, and if you're not paying attention, it could literally be life and death, because there are cars, there are other pedestrians, there are things happening where you do have to pay attention. But even the bright, bold advertising happening on city streets is one thing. But even sitting here in the suburbs today, if I were to just take a leisurely walk through the neighborhood, that is going to be great for my brain for when I do actually have to focus on the other things that matter throughout the day as well. And for kids who obviously have this huge capacity to learn and to be curious and all sorts of other positive qualities that can be attributed to helping the brain grow, if they don't get those moments of silence where they're always watching a screen or they're always pushing some button on a toy that makes a noise or is supposed to do this or that, then they're going to be extremely zapped throughout the day. And there's going to be a point where they're no longer able to focus or pay attention on what's happening in front of them.
I think that one of the concerns is that it can affect the ability to sustain attention. And one of the things that happened in children's television is that they basically, kids have short attention spans, so we need to have really short segments, and so, and it has to be really fast paced. And so what that deprives children of is, the capacity to sustain attention and to let things unfold and not have to be constantly bombarded with stimulation. And not being able to sustain attention is problematic throughout life. And even adults now are saying, I just can't read long articles anymore. It's just hard to focus on them. And that's really troubling because we miss a lot, and some of what we miss can be really crucial for, democracy or, protecting the planet.
Yeah, and sadly, I think that extends beyond the screen issue. I think that the standard Western American diet plays a lot into that as well, where the amount of sugar and all sorts of other junk that is consumed just adds to this generalized attention deficit disorder that we suffer as a society. So chapter 2 is titled "Who Wins the Games Tech Plays." It is scary the lengths that corporations will go to try and get their hooks into even the youngest consumers. And I put consumers in quotes because when you're talking about kids younger than 3 or 4, they really don't have much of a conscious decision that goes into staring at whatever it is that their parents are putting in front of them. But for a good example of this, what was Mattel's attempt at this with a smart device called Aristotle?
Yeah, that was really interesting. They came out with a device that was supposed to be able to help kids with homework, tell them stories, basically do what parents and caregivers normally do, that is part of establishing relationships. And as Mattel announced a few months in advance that it was going to launch Aristotle, and it was supposed to like grow with the child. You could start when there was a baby, and then it would just keep going. And so what was then Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, which is the advocacy organization that my colleagues and I founded in 2000. I think that Aristotle came out in 2017. And Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, which is now called Fair Play, actually launched a campaign to try to convince parents not to buy it. And it was successful. Well, actually, what happened is that it's not even clear to me that it ever got on the market, that Mattel pulled the product because it got so much bad press.
So screen time has skyrocketed among children since the COVID-19 pandemic began 2.5 years ago. Is there any decent research that shows screens provide an adequate substitute for human interactions and real life experiences? Because that would shock me if so.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are benefits to technology, or there can be. Again, it's the business model, so that big tech is constantly prioritizing profit over the well-being of children, and doing everything they can to capture kids' attention, to get them to nag their parents for stuff. And it can't substitute for human interaction. It's ridiculous to even think about, but devices are being marketed to as being able to do that. In 2022 now, there are these what are called personalized robots on the market. They're expensive now. They won't be probably, in the future, but they're expensive. But, they're claiming to be able to teach kids social, emotional development things. And that's terrible, first of all, because they're coming between children and the human beings who love them. But it's also terrible because they're owned by and run by corporations. And given that we are all surveilled so much, and if these smart robots are also a form of surveillance, if they're going to personalize something, that means that they know what kids are doing, and so they're the potential is just to target kids with personalized advertising. And robots seem like they're in the future, but they're here. And actually their precursors, which are incredibly popular now, are digital assistants, personal assistants. And Amazon, for instance, is marketing Alexa as being able to help kids when they're bored, and being able to help them with homework, and basically, again, take over parental responsibilities. So I bought an Echo Dot for kids which is the smart speaker that provides access to a children's Alexa.
What'd you find
So
out from that?
Pardon?
What did you find out from that?
Well, first of all, Amazon markets Alexa as being commercial free. It has a I'm bored feature where a child can say, Alexa, I'm bored, which I did, pretending to be like a 3 or 4-year-old kid. Alexa, I'm bored. And Alexa said, essentially, would you like to play a Barbie game? I said, no. It said, would you like to play a SpongeBob SquarePants game? I said, no. It offered me Wizarding World, which is the Harry Potter franchise. I said, no. It offered me an American Girl doll one. Then I probably one other, and I kept saying no, and then it just stopped. Every single opportunity or activity that was being offered to me was an ad on this allegedly commercial-free device.
Very sneaky. All these relationships that they have with these other companies, they're trying to push their kids in those directions versus just saying, oh, go ring the doorbell of the kid next door and go play hide and seek or something.
Or find something to do on your own.
Well,
And
that just gets back to the problem of sometimes kids need to be bored and they need to figure it out without turning to technology to help them do so. I mean, that just gets down to basic problem solving, which is also shot now.
yes, and also I think that it's hard to have a child who's frustrated and bored. I mean, they're not fun to be around.
Sure.
But but adults, think that the solution to that is either they have to play with the kids themselves, and we should play with our kids sometimes, so we don't have to do it all the time. That's for sure, and we can't do it all the time. Or that they have to give kids something to do, and the technology provides kids instantly with something absorbing to do. But boredom is actually useful for children. If parents can just hang in, the kids will find something to do. I mean, if you watch kids, as I often do, when they're standing in line in a store, they don't just stand still. I mean, they sort of dance, or they put their body into funny shapes, or, they walk funny. They do something to entertain themselves. And that capacity to, amuse yourself is just so, important for, first of all, for getting to know yourself and what you care about and what you don't care about, what you find fun, how what you find to be fun might be different from what other kids find to be fun. It's a way of getting to know yourself. And also it's a way of not being dependent on these huge conglomerates to amuse you.
You were once encouraged that the highly popular game Minecraft might be the exception to the destructive influence tech has on kids. Why do you no longer believe that, Susan?
Minecraft, when it came out, intrigued me because it was at the time, like, it seemed to me completely creative. One of the problems with so many apps for kids is that it tells kids what to do, and the apps tell kids what to do, like they're marketed as creative, but you only have like 3 options. There's only one way. If you're making a picture on many apps, there's only one way to do it. I mean, they really deprive kids of creativity. So I was intrigued by Minecraft, and there was some commercialism that went along with it. but then it was sold to Microsoft, and that just kind of, exploded. And the last time I looked at Minecraft, which was, when I was writing that chapter, actually, it was an awful lot like Fortnite. The focus was not on creativity, it was more on battles. You were playing with other kids or other people, and that could be seen as an advantage. And it is. I mean, I watched an 11-year-old playing Fortnite, with a friend, and I could see they were strategizing about the battle, and that was really neat. But it comes with a cost, literally a cost, because what Fortnite does is offer these virtual things that kids can buy to decorate their avatars or whatever. And Fortnite very proudly says, or at least it used to, this has nothing to do with being able to win at Fortnite. But what it does is promote envy, because the kids can see what kids have the money to spend on new skins for their avatars or whatever, and what kids don't. And so I just think it was fun to watch, this 11-year-old with his friend, but it was also really sad that their relationship and their play was being mediated by corporations. And the same is true of Minecraft now. And the other thing, I think one thing that really shocked me, I was on a panel about technology, and there was a teacher on the panel who just loves Minecraft and used it in his classroom. And he said, I live in New York City, and my daughter has never built a treehouse until she built one with Minecraft. And I couldn't help myself. I said, well, she still hasn't built a treehouse. I mean, the idea that we don't differentiate between what happens, on a screen and what happens in real life. I mean, that's bizarre and troubling. And one thing that is happening now that we all have to be, I think, braced for is the metaverse, which is going to be more compelling than screens are now, and more lifelike. But it's not real life, and it is controlled by corporations. And I assume will be filled with all kinds of marketing, because that's how the people making the experiences in the metaverse, that's how they're going to make money.
Filled with all kinds of brands for sure. And brands is the subject of chapter 3 in your book, and the brand plays on. Companies are now creating something called brand tribes to further increase consumption. What in the world is this? Because I've never heard of this before.
Yeah, I was at a marketing conference, and this woman was talking about how we had to think about tribes. And the idea of tribes is that they form around a central principle or religion, or something like that, or candidate or politician, and one of the things about attending marketing conferences is that they are good at identifying trends in society, but they never talk about what are the pluses and minuses. What is the potential for a tribe being good for the world, and what is the potential for a tribe being bad for the world? They never talk about that. What they talk about is how to use tribes in order to promote brands and in order to promote lifetime brand loyalty. And so now what she was saying, and now tribes can be formed around brands, and if you can get, a tribe formed around your brand, I mean, that's a good way of inculcating brand loyalty and making money.
You were at a different industry conference a few years ago that was specifically about marketing to kids. Side note, what a sad and disgusting gathering of sick people. But at this conference, a tech exec advised those listening to, quote, reduce friction. What did he mean by this? And how does this play out for kids in the digital world?
Yeah, it was funny. Actually, it was a woman, and she said, we have to reduce friction. And as I write in the book, my experience of reducing friction has either to do with WD-40 or family therapy. But it goes back, possibly to Jeff Bezos, actually. And what it means is reduce any obstacle to buying something. And that's, one of the reasons that Amazon is so financially successful is that it's so easy, it's seamless. And it's, one click buying and next day delivery and, all of that. It's so easy. And so, that's what she was advising, the toy and tech company executives who were there is, reduce friction, make it easy, make it as easy as possible. Which also, by the way, having everything so easy is also not such a good preparation for life. And that's another thing that worries me about technology in young children is if you press a button on a toy and just everything happens and all you've done is press a button, what's the message that you're getting? I mean, that, things are easy. I can get a huge response by doing just about nothing. And, the same, can be true of a lot of apps. And, along with, or what goes along with executive function, that's a really important skill for kids to have, or attribute rather for kids to have, is stamina. The capacity to keep at something and to keep trying, even if you don't get it right the first time, even if it's hard. And one of the things, I don't feel like I actively taught my daughter much, and nor do I claim to be a perfect parent in any way. But one thing I did do when she was really young, she liked puzzles. And, the one thing I did, or one of the few things I actively taught her, was if a puzzle piece doesn't fit one way, try another way. And I think that, flexible thinking is also a really important skill in this world. The ability to problem solve, to find different solutions, to think out of the box, to not get stuck, in one way of doing things if that way isn't working.
Well, Susan, that's one reason why I love how much my 6-year-old son loves Legos, is because even though you do have instructions there, you're still having to find pieces, and maybe you grabbed the wrong piece and you have to figure that out. And sometimes you have to go back and rework things. It's great because one of those analog toys that I think really has a whole lot more value than just the task at hand. But sadly, even Lego is digitized now. I bought him a Lego a couple months ago, and yeah, I guess I needed to read the fine print on the box. This Lego didn't even include instructions in the box. You actually had to go download the app, sign up for whatever Lego's digital service is just to get the instructions to put this toy together.
Yeah, and hooking what used to be analog toys to technology also makes it much more likely that your child's play is being surveilled, and that information could be used to, for marketing. But and Lego is a really good example, because it started out as a bucket of bricks. And, maybe there were things, that you could make. But then what Lego started doing is becoming kits. So the message to kids is there's a right way to do this, which I find, really sad and troubling. But then the kits started to be linked to media properties, Star Wars, Harry Potter. So not only is there one way to do things, basically it's an advertisement for the media and for other toys associated with that franchise. And then, when Lego, it's not just that you need to download an app to play with the analog toy. There are a lot of Lego apps on, that kids can download. And I was at a marketing conference where one of the presenters said, I just think it's fantastic that Lego is now, online, because you can't take a bag of bricks everywhere, but it's so easy to take a phone or whatever. And first of all, you can take a bag of bricks in the car. And I just thought it was sad that he thought it was so wonderful that when kids are out and about, they're going to be staring at a screen.
Well, one of the best examples of franchises over the last 20 years that have really gotten their hooks into different generations is Pokemon.
Yeah.
Of course, many people probably remember the Pokemon Go insanity from a few years. I literally had to avoid accidents on the roads here in Austin from people who were just stopping their cars in the middle of the road to point their phone at some random field. Had to kick kids out of my front lawn who were trying to find some Pokemon creature in the bushes directly in front of our house. And thankfully, even though it still exists, that fad has come and gone.
But one of the things, I mean, Pokemon, they're master marketers.
My kids have the cards and they don't even watch any of the cartoons or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but what particularly troubled me about Pokemon Go is that it was so popular, and that the public health community, a lot, experts were lauding Pokemon Go because it was getting kids outside and they were moving and they were walking, and it was like this whole health thing. And in fact, what the research showed ultimately is that once it was going for a few months, the amount of time that kids were spending outside or were spending moving, went back to what it was before.
Yeah, that was complete corporate spin. Now, you brought up a couple of other Pokemon products, I guess, in this book that I was unfamiliar with. So let's start with Pokemon Smile. What exactly is Pokemon Smile?
Pokemon Smile is an app to get your kids to brush their teeth. That's another thing that corporations do, is that they take something that is a daily task and then figure out how to monetize that in some way. So you can monetize, Pokemon was monetizing that by linking brushing teeth with collecting Pokemon and Pokemon creatures. And I think it's great, you know, when kids are really little, to make things fun for them. But you can do that so easily without, you know, a corporation's products promoting themselves and all these other products to you. You don't need them. Yeah, so there was Pokemon Smile. Then there was Pokemon Sleep, which when my book came out, or when I was going over, you know, the very, very last, you know, draft of it, Pokemon Sleep still hadn't come out, but, you know, they were going to make sleep more like interesting and academic. Sorry, I meant to turn off my phone. I apologize.
That's okay.
I actually meant to not even have it in the room. But anyway, so Pokemon Sleep, somehow they were going to make sleep more interesting, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, sleep isn't supposed to be interesting. It's supposed to be not interesting. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to be, you know, recharging basically.
Yeah, dreams can be interesting. I mean, were they trying to infiltrate sleep like the Molson Coors Super Bowl ads from a couple of years ago, where they were suggesting that you play something through the app as you're going to sleep and it helps you to think and dream about Pokemon as you're falling into that first state of sleep?
I could never find any explanation about what it was actually going to be like. So I don't know the answer to that.
Marketers have created a term called pester power, aka the nag factor. What is this?
So when children were beginning to be discovered as a lucrative market, this was starting like in the 1980s when advertising to kids really exploded, mostly, you know, because the Federal Trade Commission was hampered because of a lot of pressure on Congress, corporate pressure on Congress. They were defunded for a while, and also their ability to regulate marketing to kids was significantly limited. And then in 1984, under Ronald Reagan, the Federal Communications Commission deregulated children's television, and it became okay to create a program for the sole purpose of selling toys. And within a year, the 10 best-selling toys were all linked to media. And so what corporations began targeting children, wanting them to pester or to nag their parents. And in 1998, in 1998, a company called Western Media International did a study on nagging, and it wasn't a study to help parents cope with nagging. It was a study to help corporations help children nag more effectively. They called it the nag factor. And you know, basically it was a study to find out, you know, as one colleague said, how to make parents' lives absolutely miserable. They identified two kinds of nagging: persistence nagging, which is gimme, 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 and importance nagging. And they encouraged corporations to provide kids with reasons why they should have this product. They found that that might be more effective. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. And, you know, this was early on. I mean, Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, or Fair Play, we started that in 2000. So the nag factor was useful to us because people really were horrified, and it was a good way of illustrating why the corporate takeover of childhood is not good for children or parents. So in the United States, corporations are better at masking their intent. But in this book, I went and looked at, what's going on in other countries. And as the United States was in the early 2000s, they're just upfront about, the importance. Marketing articles are upfront about the importance of nagging and how you need to get kids to nag or pester their parents.
Yeah, it sounds like they're encouraging that nudging process that has become so popular in the last few years. Now, based on the numbers in this book, and this is another one of those disturbing things, 53% of 11-year-olds in this country own a smartphone. That's more than half. 32% of 10-year-olds, that's nearly a third. 19% of 8-year-olds, that's 1 in 5. But pretty much 100% of kids who are at public schools are on a tablet, an iPad, some sort of smart device like that throughout the course of the school day. I've begrudgingly come to accept that. I'm not crazy about it. I just understand it's part of what it is. And that honestly counts as part of their screen time, what they may get a little bit later on for my 8 and 6-year-old. I think in our school, we lucked out on the advertising front though, Susan, because I don't see, and I ask my kids about this as well, I don't think there's a whole lot of corporate advertising going on within our schools, but it sounds like that's not the case in a lot of schools. Marketing has apparently become invasive in many public schools. How has this happened?
Well, first of all, if your kids are using if they're using a Google platform in schools, what Google is doing, and the reason Google is there is to inculcate, brand loyalty. And so, even if there aren't commercials, if they're being handed Chromebooks and or iPads, then Apple and Google are basically marketing to kids even in schools. And I think that it's very important to understand that commercialism doesn't just sell products, it sells habits and values and behaviors. And so even if you say no to a product that's being marketed, to a child, what the child is learning is the importance of acquiring things, and part of that message can be, your worth or your value depends really on what you own. But the other thing that happens in so many educational apps is that the focus is on gamification, which sounds good, because play, hands-on creative play is educational, for kids. But the thing about the gamified, apps, educational apps that I looked at is that they're built on not to help kids get immersed in whatever they're learning, but to reward them for getting a correct answer. So you have levels, or you have stars, or so that's another value of commercialism, is that external rewards are more important than intrinsic motivation.
What is Prodigy?
Prodigy is a math game that has been very popular in schools, or I should call it an alleged math game. It markets itself as A, being free, and B, helping kids to learn to love math. So I spent a lot of time playing Prodigy, and what I found is, first of all, I was continually pestered to get my parents to pay for an upgrade. And in the parents' portal, they were claiming that an upgrade would help kids, do better with math. But the other thing that I noticed about Prodigy, and I think this became increasingly clear as the product developed, is that the math was almost irrelevant. I mean, Prodigy was all about fighting wizards and having cute animal companions. It was like Harry Potter and Pokémon and Fortnite wizard battles. And so the wizard battles, that was when you did a math program, a math problem rather. That's when you did a math problem. And what I thought at the time is, wow, the math could just be completely lifted out and anything could be put in there. And in fact, the last I looked, Prodigy was coming out with Prodigy English, where, it's, I assume, the same wizards and all of that, except you're not doing math now, you're doing English or some form of English. And also, as Prodigy developed, it became a sandbox game like Minecraft or Fortnite, where you could see other kids and you could play with other kids. So then it became very clear which kids had parents who spent money on the premium version and which kids didn't. And it was even like, if you got the premium version, you could fly through the air. And if you had the regular version, you were slogging along in the dirt. So it's the idea that this was being promoted as free, when really what it is what's called a freemium, which means it starts out free, but there's enormous pressure, to get the premium version in order to get the full app experience. But also that it set up like class differences in school. The kids whose parents could afford it and the kids whose parents couldn't afford it. And everybody could see who those were. And, in any school, and, certainly in a public school, it's wrong to introduce products that claim to be more effective if you pay for them. I can't say that Prodigy is more effective if you pay for it. And it didn't look like that it was particularly effective at all at teaching math from their own research. But that's so cruel to make class and having money part of what's offered to kids in school. To heighten those discrepancies is just so unfair.
So I guess all this leads to the question of, is there cause for hope? Because I'll be honest with you, Susan, other than some individual examples I see of parents trying to do the right thing and buck the ever increasing popular digital and commercialization trends, I don't really see it at the wide scale level at all. So are you hopeful? And if so, why?
Yeah, there's a lot of terrible stuff going on in the world right now. Oddly enough, there's more hope now for actually regulating the way that big tech, deals with children than there ever has been. So I am more hopeful. And, I've been doing this advocacy for over 20 years. And so the fact that there are now 3 bills in Congress that got out of committee, some with bipartisan support, some of them, and are now, could be before the Senate if the Senate will allow that to happen. That's huge progress. I mean, when I started talking about marketing to kids, people just laughed at me, really, or the colleagues that I found, we were just told, this is never going to change. This is ridiculous. This is the way it is. But now we actually have people in government and the FTC concerned about what's going on with big tech and kids. That's huge progress. Whether these bills will pass or not, I don't know. But it's, from my perspective, that's still progress. And then Britain actually passed a design code, where people designing websites where there might be a child who could use it have to take the well-being of children into account. I mean, that's a big deal. California just also passed a design code law. But also advocacy around marketing to kids, particularly around technology, has really taken off. When Fair Play started, it was, just a couple of people, and now, they've got, a reasonable sized staff, and they're actually working with members of Congress and helping them develop these bills. Social change doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. Good social change, or social change that has to do with equity, it comes from the bottom up. And I think that what we have to realize is that it takes a long time, and that goes back to stamina. I mean, activists really need stamina. It's not going to happen quickly.
And I don't want to completely gloss over chapter 12, but perhaps this will serve as a good motivator for anybody listening to this conversation right now to go out and buy the book. Chapter 12 is Resistance Parenting, Suggestions for Keeping Big Tech and Big Business at Bay. It includes advice for infants and toddlers. Spoiler alert, they shouldn't get any screen time. Preschool and kindergarten age kids, and then also elementary and middle school age children as well. She is Susan Linn. The new book is Who's Raising the Kids? Big Tech, Big Business, and the Lives of Children. Get it now wherever books are sold. It is a hugely important book. Susan, thank you so much for writing this, and thank you for the time today.
Well, thank you. It was really fun to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. Thanks to you for hanging out. You can watch, listen, learn, and connect for free at booksonpod.com. For Books on Pod, I'm Trey Elling. Good day.